So Investigation with Dr. T was the brainchild of our dean, Dr. Kimberly Durham. She said, do you think that you could do some type of an ongoing podcast about criminal justice? And I said, yeah, of course, definitely. And so that's sort of how it all started. So I thought that this year, what I would do is sort of call it the empowerment season. I really want to highlight and validate these folks who have turned their lives around. For the last season, we had on folks like Gregory Boyle from Homeboy Industries. He's a Jesuit priest who runs the largest gang rehabilitation program in the country. Let's look at folks who have actually succeeded at Homeboy, for example, and have a homeboy and a homegirl come on the show and talk about their experiences being in a gang. What was that like? What attracted them to Homeboy? And how has their lives changed and turned around as a result of it? This is really awesome. Justice restored, life after exoneration. And so I have an exoneree coming on, Willie McDonald. Willie was incarcerated wrongfully. I want to really zero in on what was that like for Willie. Dr. Barry Ryman, who is the clinical director at Recovery Unplugged, and Richie Supa, who is a former band member of Aerosmith. To have them both come on, talk about addiction, and talk about music. He's going to talk about how music as a modality can really be effective in helping addicts fight addiction. And of course, we're going to have student spotlight, former alum, etc., on some really cool and interesting topics. We are going to bring back UnFound at Dentzel, most definitely. This season of empowerment, like the gangs, former gang members, former folks who are incarcerated, and folks who struggle with addiction. I think that those are just really important for folks to hear, and our students to hear, and even our faculty to hear.
So we always like to remind people that some of this might be setting. And so please make sure that you're taking care of yourself and reaching out to any one of us if you need anything. But I'm so happy about my guest, my friend, Dentzel from UnFound. And how exciting is that he's back? We haven't seen him almost the whole season. So it's like people are going, where's Ed? What happened? No one found? It's like, I'm so sorry. It was really hard to try to juggle schedules. And by the way, there's an error in the video, and it's not Willie McDonald. It's Willie Donald. My bad on that video. And then I just kept saying it wrong from that point forward. But anyway, Ed, it's so wonderful to have you. And you're sporting a costume.
A little bit. Yes, on this Halloween, October 31st of 2024. It's so good to be here. I told you that I would put something together, and being that this is a political season, we have an election next week, I thought I'll do my best to dress up as Uncle Sam.
Yes.
I did have the beard as well, but I'm the costumer. Couldn't make it work. It wouldn't stick. So this is what you get.
Wow. Well, I love it. Thank you for that, Uncle Sam. We don't like really giving you any money, I'll tell you that. And I was since you were gonna be Uncle Sam, I thought I would dress as Apple Pie.
That's funny.
But I couldn't figure it out. So instead, I decided to come as a cartoon character.
Yeah, look at you. An avatar.
Cute, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's funny.
Anyway, so I'm just so grateful that you're back here, that you're with us. And I always enjoy, and I know that our students do too, the anatomy of a missing persons case. And you do such a great job with that. You usually use yourself as an example, but it's sort of like what goes on. And excuse me, but I'm Dr. Grace Telesco, School of Criminal Justice, the director of the School of Criminal Justice, associate professor, and host of Investigation with Dr. T. And I'm joined by my friend and colleague, a journalist, a filmmaker, an actor, an amazing guy, a disc golf guy too.
Yeah, a lot less of that than some of those other things, surely. But yeah, I do that too.
Yeah, and he's dedicated his life now to giving voice to those who are literally unfound. It's like these missing persons cases that are cold and forgotten. And but I will tell you this, having done the work with families during 9/11, that when your loved one is missing, you never give up. I don't care how many years it is. And we talk about something like the word closure, which is really like lame even to say the word closure because there's no closure. There isn't any. However, like my 9/11 families that, half of the people were discovered, remains were discovered, so that families had an opportunity to bury something, to memorialize something, right? And in the same way, we might know that the folks who represent these cold cases, that they are probably not with us anymore. But you can never be 100% sure. So there's this, it's not denial from the families, but it's more like this hope, sometimes false hope. It's a frustration with the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
It's a frustration in all aspects, forensics, crime scene investigation. There's a lot of frustration. And I think that one of the things, and then I'm going to turn this all over to you, is that people watch TV too much. And so when they watch television, well, I don't know if anybody actually calls it television anymore, probably not. But when we're watching media, right? Especially crime shows, even if they're documentaries, they have to be able to get it in such a package that the viewers are excited and enthralled and engaged, because a real case can go weeks, months, years, and certainly if that was on TV, it wouldn't be entertaining enough and people would change the channel. So that gives families an expectation about the criminal justice system, thinking that things are quickly found out, quickly investigated, DNA matches and all kinds of, I don't want to say nonsense, but it's TV world. It's not real world. And
Surely.
so Ed knows the real deal because Ed makes it a point to interview all of the people that matter in the case. So I'm gonna let it go. That's all I have to say. I'll come back in a minute. But Ed, please take it away, Uncle Sam.
Okay.
Take it away.
Thank you. And it's good to be here again on this Halloween. I guess that's just how it worked out. That was not planned or anything, but I know we've had this show planned for quite a while, and it just happened to be here on Halloween. And I am actually not here in my regular place, UnFound headquarters in Clearwater Beach. I'm actually over here in Orlando, seeing my sister, her husband, and my nephew. They have a timeshare over here. And so if you're wondering, well, what is that background? Where are you, Ed? This is where I am. I'm at a timeshare over here in Orlando, and I'll be here till Sunday. But it's good to be here. And as Dr. Telesko already said, we're doing something. We do this once a semester, and it's called The Anatomy of a Disappearance, in which I go over, well, what exactly is a disappearance? What does a disappearance look like? What does an investigation of a disappearance look like? What does a disappearance look like if it's not unsolved for a month or a year or 10 years? And I've covered disappearances that go back to the 1940s. And you look at these, the different ages of each disappearance, and each one of them, it's like at a particular stage. It's like going back, looking at prehistoric times of different eras, Jurassic era, or whatever else. It's kind of the same way with disappearances, in that the disappearance, when it's a month old, could look totally different if it gets to be a year old or 5 years old. And then you look at it 20 years down the line, if it's still unsolved, what does it look like then? Looking back at what actually happened, do you still see it the same way? I'm going to try to go through all of that in this anatomy of a disappearance this evening. As Dr. Telesko already stated, and we've done this before, I'm going to use myself as the missing person. I want to do that so I can speak a little more freely. I don't want to get personal with any of the, although we have talked about many disappearances on Dr. Telesco's show, when we get to teaching something like this, I don't want to make it too personal to any particular case. So I'm just going to use myself as the person who goes missing. And each time I pick out a different scenario. I think one time it was I was driving down to Nova Southeastern University and didn't show up there. Another one was I was supposed to do this show and I kind of no-showed Dr. Telesco. What happened there? What would usually probably be the series of events after that? Well, tonight, being that it's Halloween, we're going to go through if I went trick-or-treating with some friends and family members and I went missing while trick-or-treating over in my brother Brian's neighborhood, which is Largo, Florida. He lives about 20 minutes from where I do in Clearwater Beach. And it's not totally crazy because his area of Pinellas County is known as being one of the best trick-or-treating places in all of the counties. I've been over there. It's not unusual for he and his wife to get 500 trick-or-treaters at their house during Halloween, during an evening. Not unusual at all. So this all kind of is realistic as we can get, although I haven't gone trick-or-treating in forever. But this is the scenario for tonight. I'm going to go missing, and everybody's going to try to figure out what happened to Ed. We're going to look at the circumstances. We're going to take a look at me, myself, because as I like to say, disappearances are about people, not circumstances. Circumstances certainly can lead us to solving the disappearance, but if you really, really, really want to understand an unsolved disappearance, you really have to understand the person. And what I mean by that is every individual on this earth falls into at least one category of a possibility of a disappearance. The most likely reason, if that person is going to go missing, this is probably what's going to happen to that person. Whereas there are lots of people who could fall in multiple categories, different reasons that they could go missing, whether it has to do with an addiction, a relationship, mental health issues. Of course, some people have all of those issues. And then some people maybe only have one, maybe some people have none, but still anybody can go missing at any time. Please remember that. All right, let's get into this. So I'm going trick-or-treating. I'm dressed up. Let's just say I'm dressed up as Uncle Sam as I am here tonight. But I have the rest of the costume on. You know, I usually see him illustrated or painted or drawn over the many, many years with the beard and the red, white, and blue jacket, etc. I'm out there with some people, and we go out after it gets dark, and we're going house to house there in Pinellas County, in Largo area, Pinellas Park, kind of Largo area. And at some point, the other people start looking around and they say, "Where's Ed? He was right here a minute ago. Where did he go?" Start looking around. Of course, it's dark, kind of hard to see. Of course, there are many people out there on the sidewalks going house to house. A lot of people dressed up. Going to be a little hard to see, but still they're wondering, well, could he have just gotten bored? Did he get a phone call? These are probably the things they're going to go through the people's minds who I was with. And probably at some point, they may, did he walk back to the house? Did he have to go to the bathroom? What's going on here? I don't think necessarily there would be, an immediate, oh no. Now, if I was 5 years old, of course. But I'm 54 years old. I can handle myself. And you see this in a lot of disappearance cases when adults go missing. There could be an extended amount of time, hours, if not days, if not weeks, where people, family members, friends, even law enforcement really don't take the disappearance that seriously at all. And we hear a lot on UnFound. Person's an adult. If that person wants to walk off, go off, not tell anybody where he or she is, we can't do anything about that. That's not against the law. So for me, not being with friends and family anymore on this trick-or-treating on trip wouldn't automatically be probably we're worried about Ed. They know I can take care of myself. There's a lot of people around. It's not like somebody came up behind me and attacked me or anything, but you just can never rule that out, but probably not. It also could be that I ran into somebody that I knew while we were trick-or-treating, a fellow disc golfer, maybe a listener of UnFound, and I started talking to that person, and those people just kept walking away. And maybe I'm looking for them in the dark and can't find them. It may be they've lost me and I've lost them. All possible. But I have to believe that at some point, one of them, maybe my brother, Brian, his name is Brian, would try to call me and say, hey, man, where are you? And of course, I don't pick up. Rings and rings and rings, and eventually goes to voicemail. And he leaves a message, hey, man, what happened? Once again, knowing my brother, probably not that worried just yet. He's probably thinking, you know what, something's going on. He went back to the house. Maybe he's on another call, because as everybody knows, when it comes to my podcast, when guests or former guests or my assistants or somebody call me or text me to telling me, hey, Ed, give me a call, I do it. My podcast is always number one in my life. In front of disc golf and my music and everything else that I do, podcasting is always number one. So it could be that. Now, the question may be, would these people stop trick-or-treating? Probably not. Probably not. They just go on their way, just thinking, he probably got tired or something. He really hasn't gone trick-or-treating in a long time. And really, they kind of know me. I'm not that much of a social person anyway. So they might have just thought, you know what? All these people too much for Ed. He might have just got back to the house and he's sitting there on the couch watching TV and something. Maybe his phone died or something. So eventually, though, maybe at some point they get a little worried. Maybe they cut their trick-or-treating short. Maybe try calling me again, not picking up. Maybe they even ask other trick-or-treaters who don't even know me, hey, have you seen this guy? He's dressed up like Uncle Sam, the cartoon, the cartoon version of the United States, if you want to put it that way. Have you seen this guy? He has long hair and coming. Have you seen him? And they all say, nope, we haven't seen him. Now that probably is going to start worrying these people who are in my group. Now, eventually, probably what's going to happen is Brian and whoever else is with him makes it back to where he lives there in Largo. And if my car's not there, and they go in there, of course, my car's not there, then of course, they're taking, well, he took off. I don't know what happened. Maybe he got sick and didn't want to tell anybody. Maybe that's what happened. But if my car's there and they walk into the house and it's obvious then I haven't been there, that is probably when everybody is going to start getting worried. Something is going on here. He didn't come back here. He's not picking up his phone. Nobody has seen him. A lot of things are starting to look kind of bad, even though I'm a 50-some-year-old adult who is allowed to do pretty much anything, he wants. If I want to go off walking by myself, I can do that. So probably at this point, once again, it's dark. Maybe it's 9:30. It's 10 o'clock on this night, Halloween of 2024. My guess is probably not all of them, depending on how well they know me. Probably this then would whittle down to probably my brother, his wife, Laureen, and some of their neighbors kind of know me from just me being over there. And we're kind of in a football pick 'em leg together and everything. Then Brian might go next door and ask, hey, have you seen Ed? Hey, he was with us. We can't find him. He didn't come back here. And they may start going back out, trick or treat at that point, starting to maybe die down. Everybody's going back to their cars and going home. The neighborhood's starting to thin out. There aren't as many people on the streets, so it's kind of easier to determine who is who. And they may start retracing their steps. Well, can we try to figure out the last house he was with us? And then when we figured out he wasn't with us, it may be a span of one house. It may be a span of 3 or 4 houses. So they'll probably go back there, start knocking on the doors. Hey, was he with us? Did you see him? Everybody says no. Now, if you're ever in the scenario, something like that, it doesn't even necessarily have to do with Halloween. at this point, I'm going to tell you this is something probably not good. Probably. Now, of course, if it's a child, then way before this, everybody should have been worried. But for an adult, we're now talking, let's say 2 hours into this disappearance, them knowing me the way I am and conscientious, and I don't do a lot of weird stuff, and I'm not into drugs, and I'm even a non-drinker, and I don't have any mental health issues and everything. I mean, you start trying to really whittle it down. There are only so many things that probably could have happened. So you're probably thinking about now, well, when would the police? So I'm not around. The car is sitting there. My car is sitting in Brian's driveway. And at what point would the police be called? Would law enforcement, would they call 911? Would they just kind of call the regular number, the regular number for the police? I don't think they would do it within 2 hours. But if they went back and canvassed the neighborhood, maybe started going into people's backyards, making sure that I didn't have a heart attack and die in some bushes somewhere or something after they did all of that. And remember, it's dark. It's going to be a little difficult to do, even with excellent flashlights. Probably maybe around midnight, 1 a.m, when they've canvassed the area all over again, and I'm not picking up my phone and everything, probably the police would get called. Now, the question is, would the police really do anything? Probably not. A report might get filed, but the police aren't going to do any more than what my brother and friends and family have done already. It's now an official disappearance. Now, very well may be that in a few hours I pop back up, and it may be that I did find somebody who I ran into that I hadn't seen in a while, and in some weird kind of situation that person was in, and I wanted to help that person, and they were in dire straits or something like that, and something was going on, and it was an immediate thing, and it was emergency. I had to help this person, and that's still a possibility, although it's, I would say, in my opinion, probably fairly rare. But the report gets filed. Of course, the sun comes up the next day. I don't know if anybody gets any sleep that night or not. But the next day, my guess is same people. The police are not going to do this. This is something that my brother, his wife, whoever else they can recruit, maybe people from my trivia team, they go through the neighborhood again, knocking on doors. Now that it's daylight, looking in backyards, looking in pools. There's canals there, and they're not seeing anything. All right, so now, we're like 12 hours into this disappearance. I am missing. Of course, maybe something will get onto the news at some point. There may be flyers, pictures of me posting flyers in the neighborhood. Although I have to tell you, I know it's something that families do. My experience was that's not very helpful. Usually I can't name a disappearance off the top of my head where flyers actually ended up helping finding this missing person. But people do that. They feel like it's doing, something constructive. Now, at some point in here, unfortunately, somebody's going to have to call my dad in Pennsylvania and tell him that I'm missing. I'd probably be up to my brother Brian to do that. My father and I don't live together. I live in Florida. He lives in Pennsylvania. He's going to be 88 on December 1st, but he's a fantastic mind, fantastic physical condition for his age. But of course, that's going to be the last thing that he wants to hear, but somebody has to do that. It's going to be a very, very, very difficult call, probably for my brother to make. And my brother knows my dad. Long story, my brother is not my dad's son, but they know each other very, very well. But nothing happens that day. So what goes on? Really, at this point, I will be honest with you. There's not too much that can be done until maybe they find my phone records. At some point, the police may get that, but it's as Dr. Telesco was talking about before we started, that reality is not TV. They get the phone records like in 10 minutes. There's a whole process that has to be gone through to get phone records and to get pings. But let's say this does go out, and a week later, these records are gotten. And on them, it does show that the last phone call or text that went out from my phone was before the trick-or-treating ever started. And it shows all the calls that were going to my phone, all the texts that were going to my phone that I wasn't returning. And it all seems to happen at a particular time. And then they will take a look at pings if they can do that through the company. I have T-Mobile. They will get the ping information and try to triangulate where my phone last pinged. And they may find that, oh my gosh, well, the phone somehow is still on. But a week later, if it's 2 weeks later, the odds of that are very, very low unless the phone is being charged by someone. But my guess is probably the phone would be dead at that time. The battery would be gone on it, but still they would have the last ping. And sometimes pings help. But I'm telling you, given that we've featured a lot of disappearances on UnFound, that where we do talk about ping information, it's a lot of times not as helpful as you might think. It certainly can give a little bit of clarity sometimes, but sometimes phone pings and phone records only cause more questions, especially if you start seeing numbers on records or something that nobody knows who the numbers are. And even when you go to kind of one of those reverse lookup databases that are online, if you pay for them, that doesn't help you much either. Those aren't always accurate. So they'll do that. They'll look at the phone information. And so let's say that the phone last pinged right in the area where we were trick-or-treating and never left that area. But it does seem that the phone was on for a little while. How would that be interpreted? Probably it would mean that the phone, at least initially when I went missing, did not die. Somebody did not shut it off right away. It did not end up in a body of water, something like that. And if it continued to ping for hours afterwards, and then it looks like the battery just died, but it was somewhere in the area. And some people may go back out there and try to find my phone. Of course, they were first looking for me, but now that they know, well, it seems like the phone never really left this area for hours afterwards, there's a good chance that the phone is somewhere. Now, maybe in somebody's house. It could be right along, there are canals that run in that neighborhood. It could be along one of the canals. It could be in the bushes. It could be sitting on a table somewhere, but it's somewhere there. And so they would probably go out and look for it. But probably at this point, that would really, in the initial stages, we're talking the first week to 2 weeks of a disappearance, that's about all that can necessarily be done. They might also be looking, well, he had this costume on. Did we find his hat? Did we find his wig, his fake beard, his jacket? Do we find any of those items anywhere? Did anybody run across anything like that? Maybe not. And of course, it's Halloween. A lot of people are doing a lot of things, even if they did find something that looked like what I might be wearing. Maybe it wasn't. A lot of people dress as the same person, whether it's a Wolverine or Spider-Man or whatever else is popular this year, or Deadpool or whoever. You see a Deadpool mask, it could be 10 different people's Deadpool mask. And given that there's an election this year next week, it wouldn't be crazy to think that quite a few people dressed up as Uncle Sam. And even if you find a hat, is it my hat or is it somebody else's hat? Are they going to do DNA on it? Probably not. All right, this is reality. This is not TV. And even if they did do DNA on it, it might take a year before you ever get any results. Of course, they would have to get DNA, probably from my brother, to be able to test, probably. But that takes a long time. That's not going to get done overnight. So there's going to be a time there where not a lot necessarily is being done, and it's hard to see where to go next. I'm guessing at some point they might look at my social media accounts, my private Facebook account. They might look at of course, the UnFound page on Facebook, the UnFound discussion group on Facebook, Instagram, all the places, all the social media places where I am and where the podcast is, to see if there been any entries that look like I made them. Could somebody have gotten my phone and taken over my accounts and things? They'd be looking at all this. These are all things that are done, but a lot of times they don't lead anywhere. So what's next then? So I go missing on Halloween. We're now into mid-November. Some of these things have been done. I'm still missing. My car really doesn't reveal anything. Man, it really does seem like, did Ed get beamed up by a UFO? Well, of course not. I don't believe in them. If you want to believe in them, I'm not going to argue with you. But for disappearance purposes, I don't believe that's ever happened. No matter what these people say about being, taken up into UFOs and then being put back on Earth and everything else. We don't do that on UnFound. We also don't do psychics and all that kind of stuff on the podcast as well. So maybe eventually, maybe Dr. Telesco might do a show about my disappearance. Maybe my friend, retired FBI agent Julia Cowley at the Consult might do a show soon, just to get the word out there about my disappearance. I know other podcasters might do something about my disappearance. Of course, it's going to be big news eventually. Person who specializes in missing persons cases goes missing, and it's a real stumper. So what are some of the things that they are probably going to be doing? Well, like I said, disappearances are about people, not circumstances necessarily. We've already gone over the circumstances, so we have to look at the person. Well, once again, every person, myself, Dr. Telesco, her assistants, my assistants, all of you in the audience, depending on the choices that you make in your life, whether it has to do with relationships, jobs, hobbies, friends, all of these things matter. All of that will be analyzed if you ever go missing. And in fact, that will tell us more about what probably happened to you than the circumstances themselves. And using this kind of thinking, and I don't know if I'm the first, it's what I think in criminology parlance, I think it's called victimology. To me, it's like I said, I come up, I guess, with catchy phrases. Disappearances are about people, not circumstances, but it's another word for victimology. So what's my victimology? And I'm sure, like I said, with Joy Cowley, she on her podcast that she does, the Consult, she would certainly be talking about this. Once again, Dr. Telesco. What is my victimology? Well, I have no mental health issues. I mean, I guess you'll have to believe me on that. But that's never really been a problem in my life. I surely am not bipolar. I'm not a depressed person. I think everybody who's been around and seen the show for the last 4.5 years knows that. I have no physical issues that have ever been diagnosed by any doctor anywhere. Seemingly, I don't have any heart problems. I don't have any cancer issues. I'm not been told that I'm going to die in 6 months. That certainly needs to be something that is known about a missing person. Of course, if the person is older. Now, the issue, though, is, do I have problems with anybody? Now, personally, no. Now, this could, once again, getting into victimology, this is something probably that would catch people's attention who are analyzing my disappearance. Do I have personal problems with anybody in my life? Well, the answer is no. But I'm an internationally, no, I'm not a big celebrity or anything, but my podcast is heard all over the world. You can download it in most countries in the world through iTunes, Spotify, whatever, or just go to YouTube. And it's fair to say, over the last 8 years of doing my podcast, I've ticked off quite a few people because of my work. If you're doing work like this, if you're not ticking some people off, then you're not doing it right. That's what reporting is about. I'm really a reporter, but my specialty is disappearances. So that is something probably that would catch a very smart person's attention. It would be something to consider. or he's out there at night. He might have talked about going out and trick-or-treating with other people, and somebody that he ticked off, it wouldn't even necessarily be a disappearance in Florida, it could be anywhere. Somebody could have come down there, known where he was going to be, and kind of crept up on him while he was with the group and kind of somehow, without anybody realizing, convinced Ed to go away from the group, or something even worse was going to happen. So Ed might have gone with this person thinking, if I don't go with him, maybe a lot of people are going to have a problem. It would be something to consider. And if you're wondering, yes, I do live my life that way, knowing that, I've gotten some nasty emails over the last 8 years. All right, so something to consider, my victimology. You also have to consider unfamiliarity with the neighborhood. I've been over there many times, but have I walked it at night? Maybe a few times. But there are tricky little canals and things that somebody could fall into. And yes, there are alligators that live in some of them. It is Florida after all. So that's also something to consider. I have no addictions. I'm a non-drinker, no drugs or anything. So it doesn't seem very likely that I was sipping some rum while we were out there trick-or-treating and stumbling around. That's something that probably would not be considered. Also would have to be considered, to be honest, is that I know how to take care of myself. I live by myself. I am a concealed carry holder here in Florida, which I take advantage of. So that is also something to consider. If somebody could take me away, how could somebody do that? If that's what happened, could somebody do that even though I'm legally carrying a gun? But also something also that would probably fall into my victimology is that even though I'm on here, I love talking to all of you. I love when people, the listeners, email me or message me on Facebook. I respond to everybody and everything. I'm pretty much a private person. Just as an example, I was without my car for a week because it was getting worked on from last Wednesday until yesterday. I didn't have a car. I never left my condo the whole time. Didn't even call anybody for a ride or anything else. And it did not bother me at all. So I'm a very private person. So what I'm saying is, I know this is going to seem funny, but because this is just a hypothetical, but there could be things that people don't know about me, my private life, that there would be nobody who would be able to really say, well, I heard this, I heard that, because these are things that I just don't talk about. We can only know things about people if they make it public, if they put it on social media or the internet or talk to other people. Well, there's a lot of things about ourselves that we keep to ourselves, and it very well may be there are things about ourselves that maybe only one other person on the earth even knows. So that might be a little tough to work through all of that, because it wouldn't be like they could go to my roommate, say, hey, what was going on with that? I don't have a roommate. Go to my girlfriend. I don't have a girlfriend. I really don't interact even with the condo building that I'm in. I just occasionally interact with the people there. And I wouldn't really say that I know anybody very well there, and they certainly don't know me very well there. So they wouldn't be much help either. So overall, so now we have this big picture. We've looked at the circumstances. We've looked at the missing person, the victimology on this. Overall, given who I am, this could be a very, very, very difficult disappearance to solve, or to come up with a very firm theory as to what happened. Once again, this would be a lot different if the situation were different. If I was 5 years old, it would be different. If I was somebody who was an addict that was going out and trick-or-treating and might have taken something before I went out that night, that totally changes the complexion of everything. If I'm somebody who has, well, let's just say recently before Halloween, if I were a person who admitted, I'm not taking my bipolar medication anymore because I don't think it's doing anything for me. This comes up a lot on UnFound's, a lot of disappearances we feature for UnFound. We have these stories about people not taking their medication anymore. Common. So, but you have none of that. You have me instead. it would be very, very difficult to figure this one out. Now, long term. So now looked at the circumstances. At some point, Dr. Telesco's show, some other people, my friend John Lorden, he might feature my disappearance. They're taking a long look at me. And then somewhere long term down the road, would the police maybe get involved a little bit more? Maybe. Especially if there's a lot of media pressure from the true crime community. Hey, this guy was doing great work. He's been doing it for 8 years. He has 475 episodes out. He's been on TV just recently as August on the Oxygen Network. He's testified on trial twice. He does fantastic work. He's important to the community. We need to find out if, somebody out there didn't like the work that he was doing, did something to him. So the police might get involved. So what would be the most likely theory? Now, of course, in person, when I've been to Nova Southeastern University, I've talked about the different types of disappearances. What would this one, what category would this particular disappearance fall into? Really, it's hard to say, even though I'm the one that came up with these categories myself some years ago. We might look at this as the walk-off type of scenario where, I just walked off. For some reason that is unclear, I wasn't motivated by anything, that I just walked off. Maybe there was just something that had never happened before ever in my life, and these things happen to people all the time. They're fine, and then the next second they're not fine. Maybe it's an aneurysm or a slight stroke, and the person doesn't know where he or she is. These things are happening all the time. Could that have happened to me? So the walk-off, and I just haven't been found yet. Most likely I would be deceased, and they just haven't found me yet. We also could look at this as the art of luring. Did somebody come along and lure me away? Now, what luring means is enticed me to do something that I normally wouldn't do. And I already talked about that. Maybe it was somebody, a ticked off family member out there, a suspect, or somebody who's been named on UnFound has tracked me down and came up behind me and said, come with me, or all of you get it. So me going quietly maybe saved lives. That would also be a possibility. And then the other, it would just be what we call a league of their own. And they're a kind of disappearance that just doesn't quite neatly fall into any category. And we haven't covered many like that on UnFound, but usually when you combine the person with the circumstances, it's the kind of situation where they're complete one-offs. And so it's a very small percentage. So maybe it's just something that even our vast knowledge of disappearances, our vast knowledge of missing people, we have, we taught a lot of theory on the podcast and on the live show over the last 8 years, but it's just something that statistically is so rare that all of our experience may not help us. Because you should know something. When I look at disappearances, I never look at them from a standpoint of common sense. I've experienced enough with disappearances to this point to know that a lot of these things that happen in these disappearances don't make any sense. They just don't. Sometimes they do. A lot of times they don't. So logic and common sense is not something we should fall back on when we get stumped. Instead, we should be falling back on statistics, where we start looking at disappearances that are similar to mine and see if there are any that have been solved, and what was the resolution? What did happen? Was the person found dead? Was the person found alive? And from that, we can start narrowing down our idea of what happened, because our common sense is just not going to be helpful at all. And really, common sense is not scientific. So what is scientific is looking at similar situations and learning more about them to learn more about the situation that's sitting, this disappearance that's sitting in front of you right at this time. So that's my presentation. So I go missing, and I'm not going to resolve it here because once again, I don't want to lead anybody. I really don't even have in my own mind what happened to myself in this particular scenario, but this is how things go. Now, if we did like the first 6 months or something, if we look back at in 5 years, what if we were to find out that other men have gone missing in that area? What if we were to find out that somewhere down the road that somebody living in one of those houses was a suspect in the disappearance and just happened to live in a house on my route, and I had actually talked about this suspect on my podcast, and we just coincidentally ran into each other that night? What if we were to find out that somebody I talked about on my podcast as a suspect was actually on the trick-or-treat route in one of those houses that night? That would be some sort of coincidence, but it would be something that would have to be analyzed eventually. So this is usually what happens as the disappearances get older and older and older. Things start to kind of pop up, not due to investigation, but just because of time. Doesn't mean it's going to get solved, but we could get to a point where we have a pretty good idea of what happened to me, but you're never going to be able to prove it because it's a lot of circumstantial evidence. Too much time has passed. We're talking the year 2048 at this point. A lot of people have died. People have moved away. People can't be tracked down. But still, we have a good idea of what happened. But whether it was a walk-off or some sort of somebody took care of me, somebody killed me or something, it's never probably going to be solved. And unfortunately, as I've stated many times, I've covered 350 disappearances over the past 8 years, and I could live to be 90 years old, and I know many of them are never going to be solved in the next 35 years. And so my disappearance could end up being like that, the way I explained it this evening. So there you go, Dr. Telesco. That's me going missing on Halloween.
Wow.
Of 2024 over there in Largo, Florida, even though I am here over in Orlando.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you again. Really comprehensive presentation and really, seeing how the sausage is made kind of thing. You just showed us your analysis, your assessment, how you do things in when you are investigating and looking to interview all of the witnesses and family members and people who are have something of value to say that might help the case. But anyway, this was really phenomenal. And I'm going to ask,
if I may jump in one thing, probably eventually they would also probably take a look at my bank records if they could get access to them. They'd probably have to go through my dad to do that, maybe. But they would probably check, is anybody taking any money out? Any suspicious, did somebody get a hold of my ATM card or something? That's also something that might be looked at. But to be honest, we don't talk about that too much on UnFound. Usually all of the other stuff is more helpful, but maybe in my own personal situation with me going missing, that might be something they try.
Great. So I'm wondering if Cameron and Eddie can come on, because there's a couple of questions. I'd like to be able to field the questions or comments from the YouTube broadcast as well as the webinar. So I'm going to see if Eddie can come on. Yeah, Eddie, let me spotlight you.
Hello.
Excellent. And Cameron, let's see, Ed spotlight. Good. Okay. So who wants to take the webinar questions for Ed? Who's going to take the webinar questions and who's going to take the YouTube questions?
I'm going to do the webinar.
Okay,
Sorry.
great. So go ahead.
Okay, and the first question I have for you is from an anonymous attendee. They ask, what's your advice to people who want to go into the field of helping find the unfound?
finding the
The
unfound.
unfound.
Yeah,
Yeah.
finding non-found.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It has to be something that you are passionate about. It just can't be something, if you're really, 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 really interested in disappearances, like I was, like when going back to the 1970s and it finally all came together, to start a podcast. But don't ever think that my interest with disappearances started in 2016. I was interested in disappearances before I even became double digits in age. Even though I didn't understand about the world and everything, always interesting to me. So I would hope that you would kind of be like that. Maybe it's just something that you're getting into. I don't know how old you are, none of my business. But if this is something that really moves you, then you should do it. These guests that I have on Unfound are easy to reach. Most of them have Facebook pages. Most of them, their emails can be found very easily. And if you think that you have some insight and you can do some research for them, or if maybe you happen to live in the area where their loved one went missing, or people who are, could be connected to the suspects, if there are suspects in a disappearance, you have to be proactive to do that. You can't be afraid to reach out. But in doing that, you have to do it from a standpoint of really wanting to help. Unfortunately, we have, I think, a few too many people that only want to get in contact with families just so they can get like the inside story or something, so they can feel like, well, I know something that the rest of the people don't. And certainly doing my job that I do, that certainly is true, but it still has to come from a standpoint of, I'm really, really actually, trying to help. And you have to be proactive. And like I said, my guests are easy to find. Like I'm easy to find. And you just have to go out and do it.
Okay, next question.
Okay, next we have, how did you decide what missing persons cases to highlight on your podcast?
I know this is going to sound like a very, I don't pick the case. I know this is going to sound so weird because it reminds me of a line from the movie Tropic Thunder. But I don't pick the cases. The cases pick me. We are ready to talk to anybody at any time. Between myself and mainly my assistant, Emily, we're ready to talk to anybody at any time. Now, do we reach out to people? We do. But there's no, I don't want to say no rhyme or reason to it. We just are always looking for missing persons news, missing persons Facebook pages, and we just start sending out emails and messages. Here's who we are. Here's what we do. Here's a link to the YouTube channel. Here's a link to the podcast on Spotify. Check it out. Would love to talk to you. And then those people decide whether they want to talk to us or not. I don't cover disappearances unless I can talk to somebody who really, 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 really knows about the disappearance, and hopefully also the missing person himself or herself. So I'm not like a lot of other true crime podcasts where I just say, well, what disappearance am I going to cover this week? Well, I'm just going to go to the Charlie Project and just pick one out, or go to NamUs and pick one out, or go to Wikipedia and pick one out. It's not what we do. We reach out to people and then they choose to be interviewed or not. So, but as far as we're reaching out to people all the time. That's all I really can say. But it's a fairly laborious work. It's one of the toughest things that we do. I would say that for every 5 people that we reach out to, maybe we get 2 responses. That's just the way it is.
Last question, Cam. Is there another one?
Oh yeah, sorry. There is 3 more. You just want me to do one?
Oh, whatever there is in the webinar. Go for it.
I think I have 4 more. Okay, Dave B said, what's the biggest precursor that indicates that something bad happened to the missing person and they didn't just want to be alone for some time?
Well, what I would say is this. Anytime, most people have others around them. Whether, you have, kids living together, whether people are in relationships or people are married or you just have platonic roommates or whatever else. And one of the big, of course, the number one cause of disappearances is relationships, whether it has to romantic relationships, roommate relationships, business relationships, all of that put together, it's usually the number one cause. So when you start hearing people who are the other side of that relationship, like I have the man said type of disappearance, and it's usually we're just talking heterosexual relationships, although this can happen in homosexual relationships, all different type of relationships. But usually we're talking about a woman who goes missing and the guy in her life is just saying, well, you know what? I woke up today and she's just gone. I don't know where she is. Her car's here, her phone's here, her clothes are here, but I don't know where she went. That is a bad sign. And so if you get that in other situations with business partners or roommates, that is a huge, huge red flag. It's one of the biggest red flags that you're ever going to see in disappearances, outside of actually having like forensic evidence that a crime was, a violent crime was committed. Outside of that, but I have to tell you, we rarely talk about forensics on UnFound. There's usually nothing to talk about. So the biggest precursor, the problem you have is people telling stories who are close to the missing person, and the stories just don't add up.
Can we, in the interest of time, can we combine these last two questions?
Yeah, no problem. Okay, the last question I have for you is what do you find is the most important information the reporting person can provide to the police when reporting someone missing? And also, how can the community get involved to help?
Most important piece of information, if a family thinks that their loved one went missing, the first thing they should be doing, very well may be foul play was not the cause. It very well may be that the person had an accident or something else. First thing people should do, friends, family should do, is write down a list of all of the people who might have wanted to harm this missing person and find out where those suspects, persons of interest, or whatever you want to call them, were at the time of the disappearance. Most important thing you could do, even if there are reasons to believe that it was not foul play. And how can the community get involved? Of course, listening to UnFound, if I may make a private plug, but don't move past missing persons news so quickly. Take an interest more than just blowing by a story in 15 seconds. The name of the missing person is going to be there. The location is going to be there. Be proactive, Google a little bit, maybe find out a little bit more about this person, more about the area, things like that. And like I said before, all of my guests pretty much are easy to find. Contact one of them and say, hey, I heard about your disappearance. Is there anything I can do? Here are my skills. Can any of my skills be used in trying to find your missing loved one?
Great. And now we have Eddie is going to wrap up with YouTube comments, please.
Yes. We just had a lot of people excited to see Ed on tonight. So people saying hi. We did have one pretty short question from Tina. She asked, how long would it be before the police will accept a missing persons report?
Well, police should accept a missing persons report immediately. But they are also very good at, I'm going to use this, it's not off the top of my head. They're really good at blowing off family and friends, if I may put it that way.
Absolutely.
I don't mean in necessarily a mean way, but we have to put it in once again, I'm not anti-police, I'm not pro-police, I'm realistic. And the average police officer on the street knows about disappearances. And what that police officer also knows is that 90.99% of them are resolved by themselves within a few days. And unfortunately, we as humans, we get into a kind of a very laid back attitude toward it. Oh, another person went missing. Well, I tell you what, come back in 2 days. If they haven't come back in 2 days, we'll fill out the paperwork. And that's where the whole, we need to wait 24 hours. We need to wait 48 hours. That's where that type of phrase came from years and years and years and years ago. And it usually works because, like I said, most disappearances resolve themselves within a few days. The problem is when they don't resolve themselves within a few days. And then already investigators, whoever you want to point out, state police, local police, the FBI, they're already several days behind on a disappearance that should have been taken seriously from the beginning. And see, this is why I continue to say that we need to get to a place where the disappearance that's going to resolve itself within 48 hours can be differentiated from the disappearance that could last a long time if we don't investigate it. We aren't there yet. I think through a database that one of my listeners is putting together right now, I think through artificial intelligence and a lot of things, I think we're going to be able to get there. We're not there right now.
Right.
But as far as police go, I would say families, you have to demand it. Even if you think you're getting blown off and not taken seriously and everything else, you need to put this stuff on the record as quickly as possible.
And there's nothing wrong with, if you feel like you're being stonewalled, to seek legal representation for yourself, and have the attorney interface and request documents or request whatever it might be that you're going to request. And the other avenue is, of course, go to the media, talk to the media, tell your story, get it out there, publicize it, because it's the families that have the most vested interest.
Yeah.
Certainly the police have a vested interest in closing the case and in finding the individual, but not as much as, the drive is there because of the emotion, because of the love, because of the attachment. And so the family members really, they don't want to give up, and they shouldn't give up. But at some point, I like what you said, Ed, that, you got to get realistic at some point.
Right.
So,
but the problem is going back to, I thought you start this out really well tonight, talking about the difference between Hollywood and reality, is that when it comes to disappearances, I think when it comes to a lot of other different types of crimes, police are really good. But I think that the public thinks, well, the investigators, the police, man, they're good at disappearances too. 8 years in, I'm going to tell you they're not. Yeah. And it's because they don't get any education. They don't know what the statistics are, on and on and on.
Well, it's really good. That's a good point, because I know in the police academy, when I taught in the police academy for many years in New York, there was a class that was dedicated to missing persons. So, but it was more about the preparation of the report, and also, okay, so especially if it's a child, I don't want to say that there's more value placed on one type of victim versus another, but I think that it is.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
It's more, and I know we have the, pretty boy girl syndrome that is, through the media. There's a lot of different types of that going on within discipline. That's not just the only situation we have with some people being taken more seriously than others. We have all sorts of different lack of equality, we might say, over all sorts of different demographics, not just race.
Right. And age, child under 10. I mean, that is a biggie in terms of right away, someone with autism, right away, even the elderly. I mean, you'll see the silver alerts all over the place on the highway, right?
Yep.
So,
and one more thing, I think, when it comes back to the question I think that Tina asked about how soon and everything else. And the other issue is that, at least here in the United States, for the most part, people, are very deferential to the police. Mm-hmm. And if the police say something, most people believe it. And also on top of that, they automatically think, Well, the police know what they're doing. When they say that I should wait for 48 hours, well, they're the experts. I should just listen to them.
Right.
This is not like going in and listening to a doctor about how you're going to have some operation done or something. It's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
People need to be a little more forceful than that.
Yes.
Because in my opinion, once again, we have a situation, I'm not really sure they know what they're doing. And so the families need to take the reins on this. They shouldn't defer to the police. They should not just think, well, they're the experts. We'll let them do it. That is a bad idea.
Yeah. Good. Great show. As always. I missed you. I really did.
Me too. Yes.
I missed you. And I'd love to do something for you again. Remember what we did that time? I mean, there's like so much we could talk about, and you can have me on your show.
Oh, you mean a couple years ago when I interviewed you about your history, about 9/11 and everything else?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. I mean, there's lots of things that we could talk about. You pick the topic, and I'm happy to do it. I'd love that.
Make something happen, I think. Sure, in 2025. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
This way, at least we'll be together 4 times.
Excuse me?
I said at least we'll be together 4 times then.
Yes, that's right. Right. You need 3 on your, yes, of course. I think we can do something like that. Sure.
Okay, good. Well, let's talk about it. Anything else, Ed? Do you want to talk about
talk about a couple things before we get out of here, just some things that are going on with
shameless plug. Go.
The plug. First of all, I'm hoping if you have the Peacock Network that you will go and check out The Girl on the Milk Carton. I was featured. It's a 2-part coverage of the murder of Janelle Matthews from Greeley, Colorado. Some of you know that I testified in that trial twice. Well, that show finally came out on the Oxygen Network in late August, but now you can stream it. I don't know, maybe it's probably for free. If you have the Peacock Network, just do a search for The Girl on the Milk Carton. I'm really mainly in part 2, and you can see me on there. So I need to plug that. And I also need to plug that, man, I'm really excited about some things that we're working on behind the scenes. One of my assistants in particular is doing some fantastic work. And I think within the next couple months, we're going to feature the disappearance of 2 young women here in Florida from 40 years ago who went missing, and there's never been any coverage of their disappearances anywhere at all. But I think we're going to blow the lid off of this before the year is over. So a lot of things besides that also going on behind the scenes.
Sounds great. And if you could, you may have said it already, but let's just put a nice bow on it. Tell us when we could see you every week.
Well, the podcast comes out every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on iTunes and on Spotify. This Friday, we're covering the disappearance of Lene Westbrook, who went missing from Anacortes, Washington in 2020. But I also do a live show on my YouTube channel, the UnFound Podcast channel, every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Kind of a laid-back show. I go over true crime news, do my analysis. You find out a little bit more about me, what's going on behind the scenes in my life. I take questions from the audience, and we have a good time there every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Love it. Love it. Thank you again, Ed. It's always a pleasure. It's always interesting. And no matter how many times I hear it, it's like I'm hearing it for the first time. So thank you again for being here. And we'll see you again before the season ends.
Very soon. Yeah. See you
very soon. That's right. Next month. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we want to say thank you to Dr. Durham, our dean, and Dr. Kushner and Dr. Castro for all that they do and support. I want to thank my team, the production team of Eddie Hammonds and Cameron Brown and Anne-Sauvé Jean-Louis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I've been really trying and practicing. I don't know if Annie can hear me or not, but I'm hoping that I did it somewhat okay. But anyway, next week, we have, tell us who we have next week. Does anybody know? It's the 7th, and it's 2 officers, 2 detectives, Franz Pettypapa Detective Petty Papa, and he's from Wilton Manors Police Department, and also a detective from the Davie Police. And we have reached out and confirmed that, right, Eddie? His name is Adam, right? It's Adam, because we're going to have two people on. I think that's going to be an exciting, like almost like a panel discussion. It's Adam Granite and Detective Adam Granite, and he's going to be on with Franz Petty Papa, and we're going to talk a little bit about internet crimes against children. So that's next Thursday, and then we'll have something else after that. Every Thursday we have something. So just the best way to do this is subscribe to our YouTube channel, please. If we could break 1,000 subscribers this particular season, I will be extremely happy. So maybe I say trick or treat, and instead of giving me candy, you give me that. Okay, you go online and you hit subscribe, and then you hit the notifications bell so that you get notified every time we go live. Thank you again. Thank you, Ed. And everybody be safe and have a good night. Happy Halloween.